I want to tell you about a phrase. 3 words. Found on the tracks. You see it in the records of this era, again and again and again. In coroner's ledgers, in death certificates, in inquest verdicts filed and closed before the ink was dry. Found on the tracks. It was a phrase that did a lot of work in 1925 Virginia. It closed inquiries. It ended questions. It told the railroad company it owed nothing to nobody. It told the family there was nothing to pursue. It told the county it could move on. 3 words, and behind them, everything that needed to stay hidden stayed hidden. I need you to understand something about how Black Death worked in Jim Crow, Virginia. There was no investigation. Not the way you mean investigation. There was a body. There was a coroner. There was a jury of white men, a coroner. There was a jury of white men who had been called away from their mourning to render a verdict on a life that the system had already decided did not require a great deal of their time. They did not look too hard. They were not supposed to. In 1924, Virginia had passed the Racial Integrity Act, a law that said who was what, a law that put Walter Plecker in charge of the records, and Walter Plecker believed that black lives were a category to be managed, not a humanity to be grieved. Death certificates for black Virginians in this era were handled accordingly. Cause of death rendered in language designed to close doors, not open them. Accidental. Found on the tracks. Run over. The railroad was not charged. The railroad was never charged. The railroad ran on. And here is the part I need you to sit with for a moment. July the 4th. In the 1920s, the 4th of July was not a neutral day for black Americans. The Klan, which had 4 million members in the summer of 1925, loved the 4th of July. It loved the flags. It loved the rhetoric of liberty. It wrapped itself in that language the way it wrapped itself in white. Across the South, the nights around July 4th were dangerous nights. The noise of celebrations covered other sounds. The movement of crowds covered other movements. In Elaine, Arkansas, in Ocoee, Florida, in Washington, D.C., in Norfolk, Virginia. July was a season of particular violence against black bodies, a season when the worst things were easiest to disappear. A boy found on the tracks on July the 4th in 1925. Williamsburg, Virginia was found at the intersection of every one of those forces. The railroad, the holiday, the coroner who did not look too hard, the jury that was done before breakfast, the phrase that closed the door, found on the tracks. I am not telling you what happened. I was not there the way a witness is there. I'm telling you what the phrase meant, what it was designed to do, what it had done before Damiel Robinson, and what it would do after him. Margaret Burnham at Northeastern University has spent decades documenting what she calls the forgotten history of racially motivated homicides in the Jim Crow South. Her archive holds 1,000 such cases. 1,000. And those are only the ones somebody thought to look for. Each one has a phrase like it. Each one has a verdict like it. Each one has a coroner's ledger and a white jury and a family left alone with nothing but the name. Damiel Robinson. His death certificate says shock following internal injuries due to being run over by train. No autopsy. No witnesses named in the surviving record. No investigation of the railroad company. Inquest completed by the next morning. The verdict rendered. The door closed. The phrase written down, and the family left. Lee Robinson packed his things and took his wife and left Virginia. Not because he was afraid. Lee Robinson was not a man who ran from things. He left because staying meant walking past those tracks every single day for the rest of his life. It meant his children playing in the shadow of that corner. It meant building a future in the same ground that had just swallowed his son and called it an accident before the sun went down. Some places you cannot stay, not because you are weak, because you are human. He took what he could carry. He left what he could not. He went north, and the phrase stayed behind, doing its work, closing its doors, keeping its silence. Found on the tracks. 3 words. That is all it took.